All right, we're live. So, hi, welcome to Makers Row Live. My name is Carl from Makers Row, and so today we were supposed to have an episode with Jeff Staple. Unfortunately, some unforeseen circumstances had to push that off, but we have a very special episode for you today with our founder and CMO, Tanya. And she's going to be talking about goal setting today. So we really want you to be part of the conversation. So on YouTube, you can leave some comments. You could tweet at us with the hashtag #MRowLive, or if you got a text from us, you could text that number, and we'll receive your question as well. So to start it off, you started a business in 2012.
Yeah.
And so this is about goal setting. So kind of why don't you walk us through the process of how Makers Row started and how that first year went?
Yeah, and I think that's a good question because, goal setting is like near and dear to my heart because it's been kind of like a lifestyle choice of mine, to be able to set goals and achieve them and continuously try to push the limits of what I'm capable of and what I'm capable of, creating with a team. And so for me, goal setting is a way of life. It's a lifestyle choice.
Wow.
It's like kind of like startup life is like a lifestyle choice.
Yeah.
Like this, goal setting is a lifestyle choice for me. So actually the very first time that I set goals, that I was very rigorous about setting goals, was in high school. And I recently wrote about this on a Medium post, but basically I put together a bucket list of everything that I wanted to achieve. And actually, when I was 18, starting a tech company was one of those goals. And
look at you now.
It was on my bucket list. It was on my bucket list, and I'm really happy that I was able to make it happen a few years later. But the way that Makers Row started actually was a goal, was that 18-year-old Tanya goal of starting a tech company. But I knew that I wanted to start a tech company that was solving a problem, and I wasn't interested, and not that it's like a bad way of starting a business, but I wasn't interested in starting a business just to start a business. I wanted to start a business to solve a problem. And so it wasn't until years later that I stumbled upon the problem and set a few goals to start it, but yeah.
Oh, cool. So you talked about a bucket list. So I guess a good point of starting is when you set that bucket list, how many goals are, super realistic, within 5 years I could complete these goals, to what are the long-term, like, if I want to grab this, like, out of my dreams, goals are there?
That's a good question. So I think it's a good distinction. It's good to distinguish personal goals versus business goals. For my personal goals, I like to have 3-month, 6-month, and like crazy out there bucket list goals. And that's what I like to do for my personal goal setting. And the reason why I do 3-month and 6-month, sometimes I do 5-year, is because I want to make sure that I'm actually crossing some things off and I'm setting goals that I feel like are achievable. But I do also like to have that bucket list of goals because that bucket list of goals is more like a vision. And I feel like all goals start with a vision. And eventually, those items on my bucket list are going to make it onto my 3-month and 6-month plan. But for right now, it's more of a sentiment or like a vision that I have, like the type of life that I want to live. Yeah. And eventually it's going to make it onto there the next time I, sit down and do my goal setting.
Yeah.
So that's the way that I, like the philosophy behind goal setting personally.
Yeah. So do you do a vision board?
What do you define as a vision board?
I mean, it could mean anything.
That's such a millennial thing.
I know,
I feel like
yeah. I mean, I guess in the traditional sense of the word, it's someone that's cutting out pictures from a magazine or putting some inspiration for their goals on a board. I mean, I think there's other ways, like people like Pinterest boards could be an inspiration, like a vision board. Like, do you do that visually, or do you just kind of mentally like think like, oh, this is what I want to do?
I take long walks.
And interesting. With Pickles,
my dog, and he was scratching at the door earlier. I take long walks. To be honest, no, I don't do a vision board. I've never been that person that cuts out magazines. I've never done that. I'm not a crafty person. So I know.
Okay.
I don't have a vision board. I don't have a Pinterest board. But what I do is I do have like a vision board in my head of like the type of life that I want to live, and sometimes that changes. But I think it's really important to be introspective and take time out to really think about the way that you want to live your life and the decisions that you want to make and the way that you want to spend like the 24 hours in a day, and make sure that your goals align with like the vision that you have of your own life.
So going to the topic is the fact that personal goals and business goals are two separate things. So can you explain that a little bit?
Yes. So, and I think that there is some overlap in the sense that when you're starting a business, your business goals are very personal. Like what type of business do you want to start? Do you want a business that is direct to consumer? Do you want a small boutique business? Or do you want to create the next Calvin Klein or the next Macy's or the next Nordstrom? Like what type of business owner do you want to be? And it's a lifestyle choice. And so that's where I think there's some overlap. Beyond that, I think the biggest distinction between personal goals and business goals is that for the business goals, it's not just your personal goals, but it's the goals that you're setting for everyone in the organization. And because they're goals for everyone in the organization, there's a certain amount of accountability and stick-to-itiveness that you have to have for business goals. Because for a personal goal, you can always just like say that I have something on my 3-month roadmap for my personal life. I can on a whim cross it off for my personal goals, but it's much more challenging and has a bigger impact if you cross that off for an entire organization. So I think business goals have to be well thought out. I think they have to be collaborative, especially as an organization grows. And I think that they also have to be, especially if you have a leadership team, everyone has to be aligned with those goals and agree with them and actually believe that they can happen. I think is really important. Like the belief that a goal can be achieved is just as important as the roadmap to achieve it. So yeah.
Oh goodness.
Looks like
it looks like you got some feedback happening. Let's see if I can mute this.
It's okay, we're live.
Okay. These mistakes happen. Okay. But it's a good point to, if you are just joining us, if you want to ask questions, ask them on YouTube, or if you got a text from us, text us back, and we will answer your question live. Text us back. So going to the roadmap, how do you decide what goals to set for your business? I think that's a question that a lot of people would have.
So I'm going to go over the most aggressive goal that I had, which was actually starting Makers Row. And so let me set the stage on how aggressive it was, because picture this. You're a small business owner. I have a sociology background. My business partner is a designer by trade. Neither one of us has any technical skills. We have zero engineering skills. We are non-technical people. But we want to start a tech company. And also to add to that, to the just like practicalness of starting a tech company, you need technical skills, or someone with technical skills. Generally, people that are in a tech company know somebody that has started a business, or there's a lot of social capital that's built around starting a tech company. So it felt like until we started putting things into action, it felt like a vision. It doesn't feel real unless you actually really know someone that's done it before, or unless that there's some progress made. And so because of that, I really focused on making progress towards the goal. It was something that I had no experience with, but it was something that I really wanted. And so what I did was I literally created a list of action items that I could take to start to form the business. So what would we call it? What are similar companies around it? And almost like building a business plan around it. And so me and Matthew collaborated on that in the very beginning. And I think a big part of starting any business, especially if you're not familiar with the territory, so for all those people that are possibly thinking about starting an apparel company and may not have experience with this could be, you may be able to relate to this, because we had zero experience with starting a tech company. But I think the number one thing is getting familiar with the language and the culture. And that's what I did in order to accomplish this goal. And so I got onto a lot of email lists, I read a lot of blogs, I talked to a lot of strangers about this, and just started to make moves on this specific goal. After that, I think it's really important to focus on your strengths. And so we focused on the strength that we had, which was we had previously owned a leather goods line, so we had personally experienced the issue that we were trying to solve with Makers Row. And so we really tried to play to our strengths. So we spoke to every factory that we knew, every business owner that we knew, and we wanted to make sure that the product that we were creating was solving a problem. So anyway, to summarize, get familiar with the culture, even if it's taking baby steps towards that, and then also create a list of action items that need to get done in order to start the business. Mm-hmm. So for instance, creating the logo, starting the name, small things, like small wins under your belt really help you gain confidence for the next hurdles that you have to go towards. So, we got the company going, and then, the next big hurdle was raising money. We raised $1 million from investors, which we had also never done. And so, anyway, but the point is, just starting the company was challenging, and believing that, you could do it was challenging. So I think those goals around that was, really helpful.
Yeah. So switching gears, and once you start the company and you're looking, or not, let's say, starting the company is you actually have everything put together,
right,
but you're not necessarily launched. So
right.
Once you launch, from that point to, let's say, a year out, how do you set realistic goals?
From launch to, the launch date for when year goals, year one goals for the company.
Yeah, year one goals.
So year one goals for the company. I think I think it depends on the type of business that you want to create, right? Mm-hmm. For us, we wanted to create the largest American marketplace for factories. So to accomplish that goal, we needed a lot of factories. Yeah.
A lot of factories.
We needed a lot of factories.
11,000 actually.
Yeah. And so I hyper-focused on a few metrics that I knew would set us up for success for creating that marketplace. So for the first year, we focused almost entirely on acquiring factories and setting up that stage, and then also acquiring partners that would help us acquire more factories. And so we set goals in terms of where we wanted to be in the business, but also we set actual metric goals. Mm-hmm. And those metric goals, I think, are a little bit more challenging to predict. So some strategies to predict, if someone asks you for, what's your 1 year projections for a company, the best kept secret on projections is that everyone is just guessing. Yeah. And literally everyone. And so I think the best part, the best strategy to create the most accurate projections that also feel aggressive is taking a look at what levers you can pull. So for instance, we said, okay, we know that we can get 1,000 factories by hiring 5 people to go out and talk to 100 factories each within this time period. And so creating some methods that you can start to create formulas around, and then start to test whether those smaller formulas can be a microcosm to the larger picture, is the initial strategy that we took, and it ended up working out. There's always unforeseen circumstances, so we actually we pitched a lot of press that first year too, so that actually accelerated our growth on the business side of things. And so we actually exceeded our initial goals for the first year, and so my point is, in order to get to actual financial projections or metrics projections for a company for the first year, try to think about the levers that you can pull and creating equations around those levers to make it something that you can, add people to or money to or time to in order to increase. And once you have those formulas down, it's much easier to predict the future.
So for like a product-based business, what's a lever that you think is a good one to pull? So you kind of talked about sending people out to talk to community. So that's kind of like a word of mouth based thing. So are there some levers that work better than others? Social media, press.
Yeah. And so the way that I would think about it as a product-based company, and actually this is the way I thought about it for our previous company, is there's two main ways to sell product in this day and age. There's direct to consumer or there's B2B. You either have showrooms and sales reps that are selling to other businesses and other retailers, or you are using the majority of like direct to consumer like tools, like you have your own store and you're using social media and press and celebrities or influencers to get people to your store. For us, we use a combination of both. Ultimately, as an American-made business, it's most profitable to go the direct-to-consumer route, but it's the most challenging route. It's like literally you put up a Shopify site, and then you have to get people there. Yeah. And like sometimes you don't realize that. Yeah. And that was like the first realization that I had. I was like, okay, it's up. Why isn't anyone there? Exactly. Where is everybody? And so then you have to find different channels to get people there. Some popular ways that I've seen people gain traction to get people to their site. And sometimes, I want to preface this by sometimes in the beginning you have to do things that don't scale. Yeah. So, and all companies do this. Sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and do crazy things to get people to your site. So some people do Kickstarter campaigns. That's not scalable, but it's a non-scalable way to initially get users. And if you have a great product, you can really leverage those initial users for word of mouth and referrals. So that's one way, doing a Kickstarter or crowdfunding campaign. Another way is getting influencers and literally making sure that every single one of your friends and family are like promoting your product to get to that, to get to the metrics that you have set. And then social media obviously is another avenue. People also do a lot of paid advertising. Like I've seen a lot of great startups get started just on Facebook ads. So I think that really getting to a really targeted audience, I think is really important. So those are some levers that you can pull on the direct-to-consumer side of the business. On the B2B side, there's trade shows, there's trade show levers that you can pull, there's sales reps and showrooms are like the standard way that people usually get into these stores. In the very beginning, to be honest, when me and Matthew had the leather goods line, I would literally cold call boutiques and departments. And some of it worked. We got a few accounts off of that, but it's definitely like it's not for everybody and it's tiring. And so we eventually hired a showroom and it was a lot more efficient. But I think that initial experience, that non-scalable experience, was really valuable because then I could tell the showrooms like, this is what's selling. This is what are like the selling points that you have to hit. So as a founder, I think it's really important to try to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty as much as possible in the beginning so that you can at least have those insights for people that you start to hire or work with. Yeah,
so like let's stick to the direct consumer route. And what are some of the key performance indicators that you should specifically be looking at? Let's say for 1 month, for 1 quarter, 1 year after starting your business.
And the number one is like conversion rate is definitely one of the KPIs that every e-commerce business should look at. Conversion rate, obviously, return rate and repurchase rate, I think, is a great signal. But it also depends on your business. This is all dependent on the type of business that you're creating. Because if you have just a one product business, possibly a return purchase isn't relevant.
Yeah.
But some things that are generally relevant, obviously, are conversion rates, traffic rates, where your traffic is coming from. I think is a really important just metric that you concept that you should be aware of. And growth rate, I think, is important. So how much are you growing every month? Are you staying stagnant, or are you actually increasing your audience every month?
So in for a business that has not yet actually launched, and so they don't have prior data, how do you set your goal? Do you use like historical precedent of other businesses, or?
Yeah, so historical precedents, I think, is a great marker. That's what we did for our business. We took a look at the growth rate of other businesses and what's the baseline. I think like figuring out what the baseline is, I think, is important. Talking to other founders, I think, is also great too. So start to form a network of a support system in which you can be vulnerable and share a few goals that you have with a few key people in your life, and help each other achieve those goals and help each other like exchange tips and things like that. I think is really important. But
so let's bring it even further back now.
Yeah.
You have an idea. You're looking at 2017. What goals should you have? Let's say you want your end goal is to launch a business, and you want to start now. What do you do first?
I think the first thing is, if you're starting a product-based business, is figuring out the product. It sounds good, yeah. But also figuring out the customer that you are targeting. So you have to be hyper focused on your customer and like what they want, and make sure that the product that you're creating is actually something that people are going to purchase. And so a lot of that involves product development, and iteration and customer feedback to make sure that you have a successful launch. If I were to start a product-based business today, or if my goal was to launch it by the end of December 2017, the very first thing I would do is really nail down exactly what the product is and start to find the materials, the sample makers, and really start to focus on creating that sample first, and then getting a lot of customer feedback to make sure that the product that I was creating was actually something that people would purchase, and actually try to sell it. It's like the very first thing that I would do, because I think like the number one reason why people or product-based businesses fail is because they just don't sell product. And like I think that proving that you can sell the product early on is the best indicator for success, and that's where you can start to you can start to look at the baseline and start to compare yourself to these other companies that have scaled.
Yeah, so the millennial generation, which is the generation that is probably starting businesses at the fastest rate, really like instant gratification. So in a year from that cold, I have an idea, I want to start a business, what are the milestones that you could look forward to? Is it, getting your prototype done in like 3 months or something like that?
So just so that it's like rooted in fact, I'm going to go over one of the stories that was recently on a Facebook Live, actually, from Anna Bianchi. And she she's great. You should actually go back and look at her interview. But she was able to go from idea to product to getting into Bergdorf's within a year, which is incredible. And so the way that I would milestone it, and the way that I've been chatting with her, and the way that she milestoned it was, she created the sample, and then she really focused on making sure that for her kids line, that kids loved it. And luckily for her, she has a daughter that she could collaborate with, and a network of other mothers that she could get a lot of customer feedback for. So she did a similar, she had a similar track where she had an idea. She did a lot of drawings, a lot of sketching. She did some research on Maker's Row. She was reading the blog, and getting really familiar with the culture, getting familiar with all of this terminology, so that when she went to the factories, she was armed with like this knowledge and this vocabulary that empowered her to get the best rates, to empower her to negotiate the best samples, and also allowed her to collaborate with manufacturers here. And so
and knowledge is really the key for manufacturing here.
Exactly.
That's what manufacturers like to look for in a brand,
Exactly. Because it adds credibility and it shows that you're serious about it. Like,
exactly.
Like she's here, she's about her business. Like she's like a successful, she had a successful marketing life before this, and she wants to achieve success here. And she's dedicated, and having the vocabulary and the knowledge really proves that to other people. And it didn't just prove it to factories, but it also proved it to her first client, her first customer, which is Bergdorf's. And if she hadn't been so familiar with the brand and done that research and been so confident about the quality, it's not hard to imagine that it would have been harder. You know what I mean? So like, exactly. It's like, obviously, it was an easier sell because she did have that quality and that knowledge. So, anyway, to answer your question, going from idea to sample to production, I think what I would do is I would make sure that I get a sample within 3 months, which is very doable. This is generally what people do. They can get a sample within 3 months. That includes product development, technical sketches, thinking about materials, fit, things like that, and then starting to get customer feedback and starting to actually sell it or finding a go-to market strategy within the next 3 months. And then once you have that go-to market strategy and have that first large order or the first few commitments or pre-orders, however you're going to market, getting focused on the production run. And what's nice about producing products in America is that you can actually do a small batch run, so you don't have to spend $50,000 on your first production line. Luckily in 2016 you can do a smaller batch run with a local factory and then reorder as you start to scale. So that's the milestone, that sample by month 3, production run by month 6, and then reordering the rest of the year would be like my ideal scenario. Yeah.
So, makersrow.com/small batch. First of all, let's definitely plug that in there. We also have a question from email. I don't know. Sorry. How do you know when a goal is not realistic?
That's a good question. To be honest, when you don't think that you can achieve it, like if you can't actually like sit down and put together a roadmap to achieve the goal, it's not realistic. Like there's no way. I think that that's the biggest marker. So I think that when you set a goal, try to actually plot down a few milestones to achieve it. And if you can't actually map something to actually achieve it, then it's not realistic. And it goes back to the belief. Like, do you actually believe that you can do it, or are you just like setting like this to because it sounds good?
At what point do you think that you would know, like, oh, I'm not going to hit this goal? Maybe I should reevaluate. Can you do it? Can you actually, in the middle of your goal reaching, readjust your goal? Yeah,
absolutely. And sometimes, to be honest, you should halfway through reevaluate whether it's aggressive enough or too aggressive. And I think like midway through is a good time to reevaluate for sure.
Cool. So how do you help someone reach their goal if you're helping an entrepreneur? Because not everyone watching is going to start a business. Maybe they know someone's starting a business. How can you support your friendly entrepreneur?
Fellow entrepreneur. I think about the support system that I have in my entrepreneurial community, and it depends. So like some people I text, and some people I'm like on Google Chat, or like. But I think, and sometimes it's more formal. There's like mastermind groups in the city, and there's other more formalized, goal setting groups. But so it all depends on what your preference is. And what your friend's preference is. But the way that I like to support other entrepreneurs is, one, connecting them to different people that have done it before. I think that's the easiest way to support an entrepreneur. And also we also just do a lot of link sharing. Like we find a relevant article. I mean, you do that too. You know, on the team, like we do a lot of link sharing. Like this article was really relevant, or like this article has this new, you know, breaks down the new Facebook algorithm that will help us achieve our goal. And so
that Facebook algorithm, you gotta keep up with it.
And so I think like doing a lot of link sharing, and I think the reason why I think it's important to actually share your goals out loud with other people is that once you share them out loud, it's like The Alchemist. It's like super cheesy, but it's true. It's like The Alchemist says, like, the universe conspires to help you achieve your vision and your goal. And so once you say it out loud to someone that you trust, they're going to, it's like planting a seed, and they're going to eventually, you know, maybe it's not that day, but maybe the following week, they see an article that's relevant, or they meet someone that's relevant, and then they will connect you or send it to you. So
I love that. You know, not going to people essentially like for a specific reason, but like, you know, telling them what you're doing so that they know how eventually to support you if it does come along.
Exactly. And I think like, although millennials love instant gratification, sometimes you just have to wait.
You have to wait. You gotta wait, guys. You gotta wait.
You gotta plant seeds, and then eventually they will grow. But you have to believe that, like, you know, things will happen, and sometimes it is instant, but sometimes it's not.
So Chi Larson on YouTube asked, I would like to own an online boutique, but I'm not sure how to get noticed online. Any advice for marketing an e-commerce site when on a tight budget?
So she's starting an online boutique, but not sure how to get noticed online. So Chi, if you're watching, can you tell me what type of boutique it is? Like, what's your target audience? Is she typing? I wish it told you. I wish it told you that people were typing.
Let's move on to another question.
I need dots, but I can still answer it anyway. So it depends on the boutique. So I'm gonna go, like, say that I'm starting a children's boutique, and it's an online e-commerce store. The way that I would go about it, if it's a children's boutique, I would think about who is the customer. Is it the child or the mother? Obviously, you have to target the mother. So where are all the mothers?
The child would have money.
It's kind of both, but who has the decision-making power is generally the mother.
That's the key. The consumer is the person that is actually making the purchase.
Exactly. And the child is the influencer, right? And so the child influences the purchase, but the actual decision-maker is the person with the credit card. So where are all the mothers? I would literally go to, like, PTAs. Are they still around? Yeah, I'm old now, so I don't know. I don't know if PTAs still exist, but if there are PTAs, I would go to PTAs, and then I would go to, like, daycare facilities, and if there's either a specific, there has to be something that your target audience needs. So is there an angle to your boutique where, you know, you are selling clothing with a story? For instance, like Anna Bianchi, she has clothing with a story. And so who would be most attracted to clothing with a story? What does that demographic look like? Where do those people hang out? And I think that that's the least expensive way to go about it. If you have a budget, and if you start to have a budget, I think Facebook ads, AdWords, social media, talking to a few bloggers and influencers are great ways to also add add traffic to your site. Instagram obviously is like a fan favorite of all e-commerce stores.
And I think going back to Anna Bianchi, you know, she talked about asking mothers during the pick up and drop off of the school. And I think, you know, if let's say you're not a children's brand, it's basically finding where your customer is and going there. Exactly. It doesn't necessarily have to be online if you're an online store.
Exactly. Right? Because I think that people just want, even if they're, it goes back to doing things that don't scale.
Which is home accessories.
Oh, home accessories.
Okay.
I just went through this whole example.
Well,
we helped you.
We helped the kids aware person very much.
Home accessories. What type of home accessories? See, now
but actually, you know, a good one. I think a good thing for home accessories too is, especially with New York, there are so many small home kind of like, I don't want to say like niche.
There are niche
home stores. You know, if you go down to like, you know, Williamsburg on like Kent Street, like you walk by and you find like a random store, like if you go there and you didn't ask maybe the boutique owner or ask the people that are like in the boutique, you know, you have to kind of, I guess, when you're starting a business, like lose that shyness.
Yeah.
And learn
absolutely.
how to talk about your business.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think it all goes back to meeting people where they are and making sure that you are hyper focused on your customer. So like home accessories is like,
oh, thank you.
Oh, oh good.
Thank you.
Yay. I think there's a lag. So
we're just like,
I think I'm still explaining as this is going on. So I'm like seeing myself on there. Okay, cool.
Yeah, but also back to Instagram too. Instagram for home accessories is really, really big. I think that's, you know, the great thing with Instagram is you could hashtag everything on there and someone will find you. We got a question via text. I don't have your name, but he or she said, you mentioned that you raised money through investors. Can you talk more about how you did that? And this will be our last question.
Yes. How do we do it? It was a long process. First of all.
So here's another question. How do you determine how much you need to start? Like what costs should you be trying to cover at the beginning?
So I think the first thing about taking investment is that it's not something that you should take lightly. I think it's another lifestyle choice. Like it's other people that are going to be in your life, involved with your business, holding you accountable. You have to make sure that expectations are aligned and that they have the same vision of the company, or they are aware of your vision of the company and those expectations are aligned. That's the first thing. Like deciding whether you want investment, I think, is the biggest choice, and then figuring out how to get it. Like you're gonna figure it out. If you really want something, you're gonna, like, there's ways to figure things out. Like you have to research, you talk to people, like you just figure it out. Like, but I think like making the decision to do it, I think is the most challenging part. And then also, like you mentioned, like making the decision of how much you want, I think is also important. For us, the way that we determined how much we initially raised was based off of where we wanted the company to be. So we wanted to grow. We knew that we didn't want to just be two people, first of all. And as a tech company, starting a tech company is very capital intensive. So you need to be able to hire engineers, and you need to be able to have a marketing budget. It's a competitive landscape. And so for us, what we mapped out was 12 to 18 months of being able to prove out that we can gain traction with the business and see our vision come to life, and then hire a team to help us execute that vision. And so for us, it was about, this is where we are now. We know that if we hire X amount of people and spend X amount of money, then we'll be here. And then eventually, this is where we want to be. That was, the decision-making process behind taking on an investment, and also how much we took on. In terms of actually taking on investment, I think for a product-based business, I think it's all about fit. And so if I were to, we considered raising money for our previous business, which was the leather goods line. We didn't end up doing that just because as a product-based business, it's just so easy to be profitable. Like it's just like in this day and age, you don't have to worry about people.
These people have to pay for a product.
And so it's not like a digital product where people expect things to be free, or it doesn't take as much startup capital, to be honest. Well, it does take startup capital, but it's easier. It's definitely easier to make it more profitable earlier on, because it's a very straightforward business model. You make something and then you sell it for more than you made it for. And it's beautiful. And so before taking on investment, what we did was we looked at how we could increase our margins. And so we actually expanded a few product lines. And so we went from having 50% margin to 200% margin. And so it was fantastic. Because we were selling things, and this is, sorry for anyone that bought these things, but But we produced things for like $10 and we would sell them for $100, and it was great. And it was all made in America. We make sure it was quality, but we looked for opportunities to increase our margins. So we looked for that in the construction of the product. We looked for that in the materials of the product, and we looked for that in also the production runs. So how large the production runs were. So we were able to negotiate all of that to really increase margin where other people were producing the same product for $30. We were able to, because of those enhancements and optimizations, we were able to produce that for $10. So before considering taking on investment, look at ways that you can invest in yourself by looking for ways to increase margin for your business. So look at ways to squeeze out margin in without sacrificing quality in materials. And this is actually one of the reasons why we created Makers Row, because we were so hyper focused on making sure we had a high quality product, but we also wanted to make sure that we were getting the best prices out there. So actually Matthew did a fantastic job in sourcing leather. So for instance, we were purchasing leather for $20 a square foot, which is retail price. He was able to find a supplier that was selling it for $2 a square foot. Can you imagine the excitement? The exact same product. It was literally just the convenience of it.
Yeah.
And so that's actually one of the reasons why we created Makers Row, because you're able to easily find a list of factories and be able to compare prices easily. And that didn't exist before. Before that, Matthew used to have to spend literally hours calling and visiting. So anyway, point is, see if you can invest in yourself before taking on. And if you really want investment, then focus on people that are a good fit and are aligned with your vision.
Right, perfect. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for watching. If you like, this kind of more informal type of Facebook Live, let us know. Maybe we'll do it again. But also keep an eye out for the Jeff Staple episode next week. We'll make sure that we get that up. And if you have any other questions, leave them in the comments and we'll go in and answer them too.
Oh, wait. We actually have a very special thing launching on Monday. So if you're not on our mailing list, please go to makersrow.com and sign up for our mailing list. It's free, and you can take a look at what our new thing on Monday will be. Okay.
It's going to be golden. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.